Lori again, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I would like to share a very special canning project with you, and the original idea of this came from a dear sweet friend of mine named Carol Ann, who I met through the Snug group on Facebook. So I want to give credit to Carol Ann today. The recipe that I would like to share with you is sauteed mushrooms in a wine sauce. And based off of Carol Ann's original idea, I'm going to kind of do a few little, I guess, improvising things of my own. Roger and I were just recently out in our woods and we were foraging wild ramps, which is a form of wild leek. And so today I'm going to be using these ramps in this sauteed mushroom recipe. So first of all, I'm just going to page down and I'm going to show you how I prepare these just for the recipe. What I like to do is, of course, you wash your ramps up, you've cut your little root ends off, and you wash them really well in the sink. When you're washing and preparing your ramps, like I said, make sure to separate the leaves and get all of the debris and dirt out of there. And the jackets of them, when you're washing them, you just slide your fingers right down the white stem and down to the bulb, and this kind of a slippery outer skin will come right off. So they're very easy to prepare and very easy to wash up. But what I do is I take my ramps and I line them up. I don't try to line up the ends. What I try to do is I line up the base of the leaves when I'm chopping ramps. And so I just take all of my ramps and I just get them lined up so that all of the bases of the leaves kind of start at the same place. And you can see I have all sorts of different lengths here, but what's really important is lining up those leaves. Now, the leaves of ramps do not can very well, but they are wonderful dehydrated. So in a canning recipe, what we are really doing technically is we're just kind of looking for the white part of the ramp or the wild leek. And so I just bunch them up like this, and they don't have to, like I said, the ends don't have to line up, but try to line those leaves up. And then what I do is I just chop them all the way up to that leaf part. And you can include some of the tender parts of the leaves. You know, the lower tender parts of the leaves is okay, but don't go too far up. And then what I do is I save this bunch of wonderful flavored leaves, and I'm just going to set them aside because I'm going to dehydrate these later. So again, I will just take another bunch that I have lined up all of the base of the leaves. You can see all of my leaves are lined up. The ends of the ramps are not necessarily lined up, but that doesn't matter. Just go ahead and chop those up. Let's get this little pile out of the way here. And just chop that right up to the base of those leaves and set the leaf bunch aside. So I have one more here. And you can see that I have just lined. I got a little stuff that I missed there that I'm going to take off. I just lined all of those leaves up really nicely. And we'll chop up all of those wonderful little heads and stems. And set those leaves aside. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that in my measuring cup. Now I'm going to be working with 12 containers of fresh mushrooms today, okay? So I'm making, I guess, a fairly large batch, but in mushrooms cook down so much that you're really not going to get a whole lot of finished volume out of that. But what I've purchased is 8 ounces of fresh mushrooms, and I have 12 containers of these that I'm going to clean and slice also. And then I have 1 cup of wild ramps. Now you can use leeks if you want to, that's fine, they're wonderful. But the wild ramps really are a very, very special touch. It's kind of a combination of an onion and garlic taste all blended together. And because these are wild foraged, it just kind of is extra special too. But this can be done with leeks, Or it could be done with a very mild yellow onion, such as a Vidalia onion or, you know, a sweet yellow onion. That works really well too. Now, I'm going to go back to the leaves just because I want to show you how I prepare the leaves for dehydrating. And so all I do is I take my bundles of leaves that I don't want to can with my mushrooms. These are what I'm going to dehydrate. And I just take my bunches of leaves and I literally just chop them just right like so. They don't have to be real tiny pieces because when they're dehydrated, they are going to be very crisp and they will crumble. And you can either crumble them with your fingers or you can even powder them in a coffee grinder, an electric coffee grinder. And this is a wonderful onion garlic type flavor. These leaves are just full, packed full of flavor and also nutrition. And they're just wonderful sprinkled on top of any dish, either while you're cooking or right at the table. So I'm just going to chop those up for dehydrating later on. We'll get this finished. And get those into my container for dehydrating. All right, so now these are just going to get set aside because they don't have anything to do with today's recipe or canning at all. So I've got my ramps all prepared, and now I'm going to just clean and slice up all of my mushrooms. When I get my mushrooms prepared, I will be back to show you the next step in the recipe. All right, so I got all of my mushrooms sliced. I have 12 8-ounce packages of fresh mushrooms for this recipe, and you slice them however is convenient for you. Wash and slice. I happen to use my KitchenAid mixer with the food processor on it, and that went really well. If you have a mandolin works really well when you're doing this many mushrooms, or of course just slice them by hand. Whatever you can do, whatever you have, you make it work for you. But 12 8-ounce packages of sliced mushrooms. All right, so I'm going to take 1 cup of ghee in a large stock pot, and I have homemade ghee, homemade and home canned. I've already popped the top off of it, but this is just ghee from last year in July of 22. And I have a video on how to make your own ghee, and we'll put the link down in the description of the video if you're interested in doing that yourself. Now, the reason why I use ghee is because it has a higher flash point, so it doesn't burn and smoke as easily as using just plain butter does. So I'm going to do 1 cup of ghee in my stock pot, and of course a pint is 2 cups, so I'm going to use half of a pint. And we're just going to get the heat going on that on over medium heat and let that warm up just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my chopped ramps and just lightly saute them before I start adding my mushrooms. And of course, I'm using a really large stock pot just because the mushrooms have a lot of volume and they're kind of big and fluffy at first. So I want a really big pan, and you'll want a really big pan too. So just heat your ghee up just slightly, and then add your wild ramps or your leeks. If you're using leeks, go ahead and add those and get them lightly sauteed to release some of that wonderful flavor into the ghee. And we'll just saute that for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'll be right back. All right, so my ramps have been sauteing for about 3 minutes, and this is where you really get to make it your own. You get to make it really individualized to your own taste. Add herbs to your taste. I'm going to add salt and pepper. I'm probably going to put in 2 good teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to add about a teaspoon of pepper. And then I'm also choosing to add parsley, and parsley is really mild, so you don't have to be afraid of parsley. And I'm actually going to add probably about 3 teaspoons of parsley, and I'm going to add some oregano. Now, Carol Ann, in her recipe, she used a spice mixture called, I think it was Herb de Provence or Providence, which it sounded like an amazing mixture, but I don't happen to have any of that. So I'm just kind of doing my own thing with this today. Now the oregano, I'm going to do about 2 teaspoons of oregano. All right, because I really don't want to overpower either my ramps or my mushrooms. So we'll get that just in there and dissolved and stirred up. And then we're going to start adding our mushrooms and get them sauteing. And I'm just going to add just a few handfuls of mushrooms at first to get them kind of started and flavored. I've got, I'd say maybe 2 inches of mushrooms in my pan to kind of help, distribute that ghee and all of those wonderful herbs. And we'll just kind of lightly saute those for a few minutes. Oh, guys, let me see if I can have you see this. Look at how beautiful, absolutely lovely that is. Just a wonderful mixture of herbs and mushrooms. So we're just going to cook these for a couple of minutes. Beautiful, kind of getting just lightly brown, as you can see. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rest of my mushrooms in mass. Let's turn down the heat just a little bit here. I don't want anything burning. Just in mass, add the rest of your sliced mushrooms. And this is why I told you, get a really big stock pot. Because that is a lot of volume. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a dry white wine, okay? And I've chosen just a Chardonnay today. And dump that in. We're going to probably use 1/2 to 3/4 of the bottle. I'm going to start with 1/2 the bottle and allow my mushrooms to cook down just a little bit. So we'll stir that up. Okay, I'm going to get a lid on this and put it down on absolute low heat, and we're just going to steam and simmer this for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to check and see what the moisture level is in it. And at that point in time, I might decide to add just a little bit of water. You don't want to go crazy on that wine because it will overpower everything. So with this many mushrooms, I wouldn't do over, like I said, over just that standard bottle of wine. I wouldn't do over 1/2 the bottle, but a Chardonnay is pretty light flavored and it should be good to go. But once in a while, stir these mushrooms just to make sure that you're not burning and sticking on the bottom of the pan. And the mushrooms will create some of their own liquid as they cook down. But be attentive to it and check in on it and stir it occasionally. So we're just going to let this cook and simmer for 5 minutes, and then we'll check on it and see if it needs a little bit more fluid. So I'll be back in just a few. All right, guys, so we've been simmering for about 5 minutes, and I have stirred occasionally. The mushrooms are cooking down really nicely, but I am going to add quite a bit of water or fluid here. And I got to thinking about it. I did go and figure out how much exactly wine I put in here, and it was approximately 1.5 cups or 2 cups of white wine. Of course, you know me, I'm a dump cook, but off cam I went ahead and I measured it, and that's what it ended up being. It's about 1.5 cups to 2 cups. Now, after that simmering period where it's absorbed all those wonderful flavors, now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cover it with water. And so just go ahead and add water just to barely cover your mushrooms. And they will float a little bit, so make sure you kind of press down so that you don't add too much fluid. And there, I'm just about, I can press my mushrooms down just a tad, and they are covered now nicely in water. All right, I am going to replace the lid on my pot. I'm going to bring my temperature up to medium. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I will turn it down to a simmer and simmer for approximately 5 minutes. And at that point in time, then I will be back to show you how to put them in canning jars. All right, so I brought the mushrooms up to a boil, and then I lowered it to a simmer, and I simmered for around 5 to 10 minutes. You know, it's not an exact science. Just make sure that your mushrooms have cooked down to half of their volume. And I'll take the lid off right now and show you exactly what I mean. Okay, remember I had all the fresh mushrooms. They almost filled up this whole entire stock pot. Mushrooms cook down to almost nothing. Let's see if I can touch that handle there. Can you see that? And this is exactly what you want them to look like. They should be reduced in size. And the reason why we do this is if you put raw mushrooms into a canning jar in the canning process, either in the pressure canner or by the hot water bath, they cook and they reduce in size, and you will only have a half full jar after that canning process. So what you do is you reduce them before you put them into the canning jar so that it starts as a full jar and it completes as a full jar. So what we do now is, first of all, in the meantime, while I was cooking these mushrooms and simmering them, I got my canner ready, because remember that if you have a hot food item, you always want a hot canner. If you have a cold food item, you want a cold canner. So since we're working with hot, I wanted to prepare my canner and have hot canning water in the canner. So that has been heating up while my mushrooms were simmering. And I have clean jars. And what we're going to do is we are going to take a slotted spoon and we are going to fish out these mushrooms and ramps and stick them into our canning jar. Now we're not going to pack these in, just dump them in. They're going to kind of settle down on their own. This is just one of those food items that just kind of settles on its own, so you really don't have to do a whole lot with it. So just take out all of your solid matter and get it to 1-inch headspace in your jar. I'll move that over and show you what I'm doing here. All right, so my mushrooms, my cooked mushrooms, are up to that glass lip that is always underneath the threads of your jar. So up to 1 inch, and this is the 1-inch headspace that I'm talking about. The whole thread area down to this glass lip is 1-inch headspace. So bring your mushrooms up to that 1-inch headspace. And then what you want to do is you want to go ahead and take a ladle, and you want to ladle out some of that wonderful cooking juice that was in those mushrooms, and cover those mushrooms to the same 1-inch headspace. All right. So now I will lift this up and let you see I have filled with the cooking juice up to that same 1-inch headspace. And at that point in time, we are going to take a clean wet washcloth and just wipe off the rim of the jar just to make sure that there's no food particles or grease, we're going to take a clean washed lid and flat, or flatten ring, I guess, and screw that on fingertip tight. And that's hot, so be careful. And place them into your hot canner. And just continue that process until you have emptied your stock pot. So I will just go ahead and continue filling jars until we're out of mushrooms. Okay. All right, so what I have left right now is an amazing mushroom infused broth, okay? Just this this cook down period has made this awesome broth. And what I do is I can this up also. Now this makes an amazing soup base, an amazing gravy base, whatever you feel like you can use this for. This is tasty stuff. And so I can this up along with my mushrooms at the same time, because generally mushrooms cook down so that you're not going to have a very full canner to begin with anyway. So just go ahead and can up that wonderful mushroom stock along with your actual mushrooms, and use this in recipes however you see fit. This is tasty, wonderful stuff. So don't waste that extra broth that you have. It's just flavorful and wonderful. You can add it to hot dishes, soups, stews, make it into gravy. You get the whole idea. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to ladle all of my broth into jars and can it right along with all of my mushrooms. My canner is hot, my food item is hot, and I don't have to worry about siphoning or quickly heating up the food and having overflow issues because it's all hot. So I'm just going to put this on high. I'm going to bring it to a vent. I'm going to vent for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to place the weight for my appropriate pressure for my altitude, and I'm going to pressure can these pint jars of mushrooms and mushroom stock or broth for 45 minutes. If you would like to water bath these, please water bath them for 3 hours. All right, so I got through my 45-minute pressure canning session, and I allowed my canner to cool off, and I cracked a little bit and allowed it another 10 minutes, cracked it back a little bit more, allowed another 10 minutes, and now it's totally safe to remove the lid without having any siphoning. So let's remove one of these beautiful jars. Oh, beautiful jars of mushrooms. And you can see they're even still boiling. Look at how gorgeous that is. mushrooms and ramps and ghee and wine. These are going to be absolutely amazing in stew or roast or soup or in hot dish. Oh, you guys, these are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. On this 12 packages of 8 ounces per package of raw mushrooms, and that measurement of ramps I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 pints of mushrooms and 3 pints of broth. So 10 beautiful jars of mushroom product that can be used in soup, stew, hot dish, as gravy. That touch of wine is just amazing. You can be flexible. You can use leeks or onions instead of the ramps, and you can omit the wine altogether and just do completely just water to blanch and cook your mushrooms. That's absolutely fine. The wine is not required by any means at all, but it does add just an extra little just touch of taste that is amazing over steaks or with oh, what are those hamburgers? Excuse me. Oh, Swiss steaks. I was thinking hamburger steaks, but with the Swiss steaks, just amazing over the top of that. The broth can be drained off of the mushrooms and made into a gravy, and then the mushrooms and ramps can be added back in and used. You know, it's so totally flexible. And the herbs are totally flexible. You make it to your taste and your desire. As long as you do the pints for 45 minutes in the PC or 3 hours in a hot water bath, you're going to be good as gold for years on your shelf. Thank you for joining me again today. God bless you all, and happy canning, everybody.